here is what we are doing. What are we doing today, Yuvraj?
So we were gonna talk about Harry Potter books, and I'm actually not sure. Can you fill me in?
Right, so just for context to everybody that's listening, Yuvraj does not know anything about what I have planned for today. Yuvraj, have you seen the Crimes of Grindelwald or like the Fantastic Beasts series?
I saw the first movie, not the second one, and
Not
I
the
don't
second
remember
one.
the first one at all.
Okay, so we can't talk about that. That was the first thing I had planned for today. The second thing was the Philosopher's Stone, or on the
Yeah, I
likelihood
remember that.
on the low likelihood that somebody is listening from the US, the Sorcerer's Stone. And obviously this whole thing is going to have spoilers for basically the entire book series. So tune out right now if you don't want that. Okay, so in the first chapter of the Philosopher's Stone, what happens is we see that Mr. and Mrs. Dursley lead a very normative life, and they're really freaked out about everything that's even slightly out of the ordinary. And the reason for that is Petunia is afraid that Lily Potter is going to approach them along with Harry and James. Right away, I have a theory about what happens in the next chapter. This is The Boy Who Lived. In that chapter, Harry gets dropped off at the Dursleys' doorstep, and we later learn that he would get picked up by Aunt Petunia in the morning, and Dursley would poke and prod him and all of that. What I think happened is, and this might be a very unpopular opinion and people might hate me for this, but what I think happened there is, because Harry was a Horcrux, that's the reason the Dursleys mistreated him so much.
But how would they know he's a Horcrux? They don't have any connections to the
they don't have
wizarding
any connections
world.
to the wizarding world. But later in the 7th book, we see that whoever is wearing the locket, Slytherin's locket, which is also a Horcrux, is bad-tempered. They're in a bad state of mind. They're more likely to lash out at small things. Basically, their temperament is much worse than whatever else, and this happens much more in magnitude to Ron. That's a weird way to put it. A lot of Ron is affected more by this. I'm not able to speak today, so that's just a natural byproduct of what I'm assuming is the Horcrux protecting itself. Now, Harry is also Horcrux, and the part of Harry that is actually Voldemort would not want other people getting close to Harry. What I actually think happened is that the Dursleys were initially okay with taking in Harry and raising him properly as their own child, like they raised Dudley. And the reason that I think this is because, Harry is protected by Lily's sacrifice. The entire plot of the story is based on the fact that Harry is able to love, and because of that, he has something that Voldemort doesn't. But I don't think that sacrificial protection and the charm that Lily and Dumbledore basically put on Harry when Lily got herself killed by Voldemort in an attempt to save Harry from him, the charm that they collectively put on Harry would not work unless Harry was also under somebody else's loving protection. And
wait, I didn't get it.
You didn't get it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
the
entire plot of the books is basically just that Harry is protected from Voldemort because of his mother's sacrifice, right? And basically it comes down to, according to Dumbledore, it comes down to love. It comes down to the fact that Lily, in her love for Harry, sacrificed herself, and that cast a sort of sacrificial protection charm over Harry, which would stop the murderer of Lily, which is Voldemort in this case, from ever harming Harry as long as he calls home a place where Lily's blood this case is
Yeah.
Petunia's household. Uh, but I
Oh.
don't think that would work at all unless the person that took in Harry actually loved him to begin with. They did it as, out of love for Harry and not as out of a sense of beauty or anything.
Yeah.
So,
But but they did not like him.
they did not like him.
Yeah.
But it would follow from this theory
I get your
that
point.
Petunia at least had to love Harry at least a little bit for this protection to even work. And what do we see?
I don't think they loved him at all. They despised him a lot.
But we only saw their interactions once Harry turned 11 and started going to Hogwarts. And what happened when Harry started going to Hogwarts? Voldemort started being able to harm him more and more marginally. And that the degree of control that Voldemort had over Harry's life increased with each passing year. In the Chamber of Secrets, it was a little bit more than the Philosopher's Stone.
So,
the Prisoner of Azkaban,
do you think that Voldemort technically? So I was saying, do you think that Voldemort technically killed himself? Because the prophecy was that Harry would kill Voldemort, and Harry was actually, he had a part of Voldemort in himself. So did he kind of just hit himself in the foot with an axe?
So at the risk of going on a huge side tangent here, when Harry killed Voldemort, the Horcrux inside of Harry was already dead. Voldemort killed that Horcrux when he killed Harry, and Harry ended up being able to talk to Dumbledore. Dumbledore is obviously very, very dead at that point.
Right.
Harry then came back because his connection with Lily, and therefore his connection with Voldemort, because Voldemort of course took Harry's blood in resurrecting himself. That connection ended up binding Harry to life, which means that Harry was basically able to come back from the dead and finish off Voldemort. Getting back to the theory that I had before, what I think is that in the 11 years between the Boy Who Lived chapter and the next chapter where we see Harry actually being abused by the Dursleys, them taking him to the zoo but mistreating him a lot, what happens in that 11-year long gap, or that 10-year long gap I guess, is a complete mystery. And what I think happened in that gap is that the Horcrux inside of Harry began to manipulate the Dursleys into hating Harry. Because obviously,
are you sure they did not, hate him the moment he was delivered at their doorstep?
That doesn't make sense to me. That never made sense to me reading the books. I always understood that was protecting Harry from Voldemort. Well, for one thing, it didn't just poof at all. It slowly withered away until in the 7th book it becomes a lot stronger because Harry starts hunting down Voldemort, and his and Voldemort's lives become more intertwined, and therefore the blood connection that they have starts protecting Harry more and more. But what happens before that is that charm, the charm that Dumbledore placed on Harry using Lily's sacrificial protection, withers away slowly. In the Philosopher's Stone, Voldemort tries to kill Harry but utterly fails. In the second book, the same thing happens, but Harry comes very close to dying. In the third book as well, Harry comes much closer to dying than he was in the past 2 years. In the fourth book, Voldemort actually comes back, almost kills Harry, but then Harry ends up escaping. In the process, Voldemort kills one of Harry's close-ish friends, that is Cedric Diggory.
Cedric,
yeah. In the fifth book, of course, there are a lot of murders, and also Voldemort kills Sirius and comes very close to gaining the prophecy, and also comes very close to killing Harry. Again, Harry sort of stops Voldemort from possessing him, and the books never really made clear what happened there. And then another thing that happened in that year is that Harry basically was pushed over the edge and began actively trying to kill Voldemort. In the 6th book, again, Voldemort basically enters Hogwarts, even though he isn't there. He himself isn't there, but his influence is still growing much stronger over Hogwarts, and his Death Eaters end up killing Dumbledore. And then in the 7th book, a lot of harm comes to Harry through Voldemort's actions. Voldemort doesn't actually get very close to killing him at all. So this withering away of that charm kind of tells me that charm started to grow weaker and weaker and weaker as the Dursleys' hate for Harry increased.
Oh, yeah, got it.
So, it would follow that the 10 years between the chapter The Boy Who Lived and Harry getting the Hogwarts letter, the 10 years between that same process happened, but we just don't realize it. That same process took place, but it was much less apparent because the Dursleys' hate for Harry gradually increased, and this kind of increased relationship, it would make sense that hate started at 0 at some point.
But I think that they did not like Harry from the moment that they saw him, just because Petunia, she did not like Lily. She actually called her sister a freak and everything in the movie.
Yeah, but
and I guess in the book as well.
The way I interpreted that whole thing is Petunia being jealous of Lily rather than disliking her outright. Because Petunia does try to get into Hogwarts. She even writes a letter to Dumbledore. So that jealousy might have been the cause of that, dislike. That wouldn't mean that Petunia would dislike her nephew, who at that point was a defenseless child, even after Lily has died. And also she ultimately did take Harry in, which means that she didn't hate him as much as, well, one of two things happened. Either she portrays a lot stronger hate towards Harry than she actually does, or some outside power influenced Petunia and made her hate for Harry grow stronger and stronger and stronger until the point where Harry tries to save their lives and they stop hating him, essentially.
Yeah, got it. I think you might have a point, but I'm not sure to what extent is this true or might be true.
Yeah, I initially doubted this theory a lot when I first came. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. I had nothing better to do and I was in the shower, so this was a random shower thought.
Yeah.
But I think this is even thematically, even in the context of the story, rather than the events that happen in the world of Harry Potter. Even in the context of the story itself, this makes a lot more sense than everybody who is related to Harry by blood just outright hating him. Because ultimately, the books make it a point to emphasize that however strong your found family is, blood is still thicker than water. That's not true at all in the real world, but that's the moral of the story ultimately in the books. And it would make sense that if the books consider blood to be thicker than water, it would make sense that Harry's blood relatives didn't really hate him that much out of their volition and were forced into that by some sort of power outside, a power which is purposefully malevolent towards Harry, and the only organization that we see really doing this throughout the 7 books are the Death Eaters.
So,
therefore,
remind me something, or tell me something that we know that the Dursleys were related to Lily. Like, Petunia was Lily's family. What about Harry's father's family? What happened to them? Like, were Dursleys the only blood relatives that Harry had?
Yeah, so the books do say that Dumbledore clearly informs Professor McGonagall that the Dursleys are the only living family that Harry has. And even though this is never actually mentioned in the books, we come to know later that when James was around 19 years old, his parents died of dragonpox, both of them.
Wait, dragonpox? That's a thing?
That's a thing.
Alright, I did not know that.
Well, in your defense, it doesn't really come up much in the books. There's only 3 or 4 instances, I guess, that we know of.
Alright. Acha, that's a wizarding world disease, right?
It's
not a real thing.
It's not a real disease, of course.
Yeah, I thought this was like some crazy ass version of chickenpox or something.
No. That's very much a wizarding world disease. In fact, Dumbledore is cited to have discovered the cure for it. I think. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. I think there's some problem at my end. I can see some disturbance while recording. I don't know what's causing it though. It's really quiet over here.
थोड़ा बहुत तो waveform में इधर-उधर होता ही है. But actually, I can hear some sort of background noise while you're talking. So maybe it's the fan.
Yeah. No, actually, the thing is now there's some construction going on. So I'm not sure कि वो कब start हो जाता है, because it's very irritating.
अच्छा.
And like the construction is going on just behind this wall.
Okay.
Yeah. So now it's fine. I switched off the fan.
Now, we're going back into the podcast. So now, now that we've discussed the fantastical element of our lives, let's move on to real life for a bit, which is depressing and nobody wants to do that, but we should be acknowledging it a little. The whole point of this podcast is, so this podcast is basically set up by an organization called Project Health Warriors, which is basically dedicated to
okay.
Just to snap into real life for a little bit, this podcast is based in Delhi, and we're redoing this.
Okay.
So this podcast is basically set up by an organization called Project Health Warriors. Project Health Warriors is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to collecting donations, basically to get people the healthcare that they deserve. The COVID-19 pandemic in India has put on full display that however well prepared our healthcare system is, there are faults in it, and while I'm not blaming anyone for anything, I'm 100% sure that everybody did their best to thwart this. There are some fallibilities families, there are some problems that can be exposed by very extreme situations. So Project Health Warriors is a non-profit again, and we are dedicated to getting the poor and needy the healthcare that they deserve and that ultimately that they need to survive. Because obviously they're all humans, they all deserve a chance at life as much as all of you do. So to donate a little bit to our cause, you can visit our Facebook page, you can visit our Instagram, you can also go to our website. All of those are linked in the notes or the description down below. You can subscribe and or follow. You can leave a review, positive review that would help get more people invested in this podcast, because the faster we build an audience, the more this organization progresses and the more good it can do. Now, back to the content of the podcast. So अब क्या डिस्कस करने वाले हैं?
Okay, this is like a very controversial topic. Like, was Snape actually a good person or not?
ये कर सकते हैं. So next we are going to move on to a topic that is 100% going to raise some hats. That was a weird way to put it, but I'm not editing that out. This is definitely going to ruffle some feathers. Was Snape a good person, or was he in the end not sound morally? I personally lean towards the fact that he was not a good person. And I'll tell you exactly why. For one thing, he claimed to love Lily, and he claimed that he wanted to protect her son, Harry. But what does he do to Harry? He basically, all he does is try to get him expelled. Which, by the way, in this context, getting Harry expelled is as good as getting him killed.
Because Hogwarts.
Harry is safe until he's 17, for all Snape knows, and for all we know, for the first 4 books basically. Harry is safe till he's 17, but after that he's going to have to use his own skills and his own magic to defend himself. What happens if Harry gets expelled in his first or his second year, doesn't understand magic at all, and then spends the next 6-7 years of his life at the Dursleys, at which point he is vulnerable to any Death Eater who wants to kill him. And we know that a lot of the Death Eaters, the ones that are remaining in normal civilization in the Wizarding world, a lot of them might see Harry as a rallying point, but a lot of the Death Eaters that are in Azkaban, and therefore the ones that are much more dangerous, see Harry as the reason for their master's downfall, and ultimately they think that killing Harry would either bring Voldemort back or allow them to bring Voldemort back. Because obviously they know that Voldemort is immortal. That's what he's been telling the Death Eaters all along, and they don't believe that Voldemort is actually dead. Bellatrix clarifies that very well when she tells Snape to basically pull his head out of his behind. That's another thing that I was going to bring up. I mean, this is a man in his 30s who is lusting after a girl who he ultimately drove away when they were 15. Moreover, the girl he's been lusting after this whole time, is married, has a child, and is now dead. I mean, move Severus Snape, what are you doing? That's not only is that very strange, it's extremely inappropriate, and it's not something that he didn't even act good around Lily. Here's the thing. Snape is always justifying his misdemeanors around Lily also. What happens in the flashback sequence in the chapter Snape's worst memory is that Snape, there's no delicate way to put it. James essentially pranks Snape, and hanging him upside down by the ankle is the Wizarding World equivalent of a prank. That's very clear in the books. Ron, who is the only character that we know has a good knowledge of the customs of the Wizarding World and how things work in the Wizarding World, says that they were just having a laugh and we should trust Ron more than we trust some homicidal maniac who joined a genocide group out of hate for James. Right. What else does James do, or does Snape do in response to that? He uses dark magic to try to kill James. The Sectum Sempra curse is basically instant hemophilia. It does not heal on its own. Needs a counter curse, which apparently only Snape knows. It would basically bleed until you bleed out. That's part of what happened to George when his ear got cut off by the Sectum Sempra curse. It's what almost happened to Draco had Snape not killed him. And I mean, that just kind of cements for me his actual intentions. Snape that doesn't justify his just the bad stuff that he did just for laughs. And by the way, in the chapter called The Prince's Tale, that's I think in the 7th book, I'm fairly sure, it's fairly clear that, well, for one thing, Snape was already an aspiring Death Eater when he was 14. That's younger than us. And with the Dark Arts and also with Voldemort, he got involved with people whom we all know to have become Death Eaters. McNair, Rosier, Mulciber, people like that. We know that all of them eventually went on to become Death Eaters, and he was already involved with them, and to a certain extent justifying their anti-Muggle-born actions in school. I mean, Lily even confronts him about this. She says that she acknowledges that James is an arrogant dorag, but that what Snape's friends and Snape do is dark magic, and it is very, very wrong. And she even makes it very clear to Snape that she considers that worse than James's arrogance. And James's response to Lily when she confronts him about the whole mudblood incident, that's also very, very telling, is that Lily knows that Snape uses the word mudblood to basically sort of slur against all Muggle-borns that he meets, other than Lily. And he tries to pretend that Lily is different, but in the end she is not. Lily is one of the many Muggle-borns that died because of Voldemort, and even if Voldemort had not killed her in the first Wizarding War, she would have died in the second Wizarding War or been put in Azkaban in the second Wizarding War because of his genocide against Muggle-borns. save Harry. Sirius wasn't going to kill Harry. Snape didn't save Harry from the Dementors. Harry saved Harry from the Dementors. Yeah, so Harry believed that it was his father, but later what happens is he and Hermione go back in time. Harry goes to the other side of the lake where he thought he saw his father, and doesn't see his father, and he sees Sirius almost get kissed, and past Harry, this is all very confusing, but he sees Sirius and past Harry both almost get kissed by Dementors, which is when he realizes that he never saw James, he saw himself. He comes out of the bushes, performs the Patronus charm, fights off almost 100 Dementors according to what Snape said. Snape then comes along, bundles up, Sirius and Harry and brings them to the hospital wing. And he even tells Dumbledore and Fudge that he doesn't know who saved them, but all that he knows is that it would have taken an extremely powerful wizard to do it. No, Snape's Patronus is a doe. It's not a stag. Yeah, so the time when we see Snape's Patronus is when it picks up Harry and basically guides him to where Snape has hidden the sword of Gryffindor inside of a frozen lake. And that's when Ron saves Harry's life. Ron destroys the Horcrux. Ron then gets almost beaten to death by Hermione in an awkward bout of sexual tension, which I never understood. Honestly, how cool would it have been that if why can't I speak today? How cool would it have been if Hermione just kind of kissed him? I don't know. Kissed Ron, I mean. Because, she was pretty much pining for Ron the whole time he was gone, so why are you trying to kill him now? But that was such a... that was such a... No, they didn't do that in Chamber of Secrets. No. That's how the movie is presented. They actually kissed in front of Harry in the corridor where Hagrid comes flying in through the window because Grob threw him through the window. Okay, so maybe we should close in segment. So unfortunately our discussion is cut short by quite a lot because either of us have some other engagements, and we're now going to wind up essentially. But if you enjoyed this, tune in next week because we're going to release this podcast next week, and when that happens you can get more of our delightful talk. And remember, this is all done for charity. All of the proceeds or the revenue generated from this podcast is going directly towards benefiting people who need healthcare but can't get it. So this is all done for a good cause. We don't get anything out of it. And if you think that is a noble cause to be a part of, spread the word. Because like I said before, the faster we build an audience, the more benefit that we can do.